I want to tell you about a moment I witnessed that I have never been able to fully explain away with logic. I was at a dinner, a small gathering, maybe 12 people around a long table. There was a man there, 63 years old, silver-haired, nothing about his appearance that would make you stop walking. And yet, at some point during the evening, I realized that every woman at that table was oriented toward him. Not obviously, not in a way anyone would have pointed at, but oriented. The way a room full of plants will all lean slightly toward the single window. He was not the loudest person there. He was not performing. He was not even speaking for much of the time. He was simply present in a way that made everything near him feel quieter and more significant. And I remember thinking, what is that? What is the actual thing that is happening in this room right now? I spent a long time finding the answer to that question. And today I am going to give it to you completely. Not the surface version, not the version that says confidence or presence and leaves you with nothing concrete to hold. The real answer, the specific, nameable, understandable thing that men over 60 carry when they have done the work of becoming fully themselves. The thing that makes women, without deciding to, without even fully understanding why, completely surrender the part of themselves that is always on guard. But first I need to dismantle something, because there is a story most men over 60 have been told, quietly and consistently, by the culture around them. The story says that the most attractive version of you already passed, that it existed somewhere in your 30s or 40s, and that what you are now is the aftermath of that version, diminished, fading, competing on a field that was tilted against you the moment your hair started going gray. I need you to hear this clearly. That story is not just wrong, it is exactly backwards. And I can prove it from the inside. Here's what women actually feel when they encounter a man who has genuinely arrived at himself. And I am using that phrase deliberately. Arrived at himself, not performed himself, not constructed himself for external approval, actually arrived. Through loss and recovery, through years of being wrong and learning, through the slow, patient work of becoming someone who no longer needs the room to confirm him. When a woman's nervous system encounters that quality in a man, something very specific happens. Her own nervous system, which is constantly running a low-level assessment of her environment, of who is safe and who is performing and who needs something from her, goes quiet. The assessment stops because there is nothing to assess. The man is simply there. Fully there, not reaching for anything, not monitoring for her reaction, not waiting to see how he is landing, just present. And that stillness, that specific quality of a man who needs nothing from the moment he is in, creates in the woman nearest him a sensation she will almost never describe accurately, but will feel unmistakably. The sensation of being allowed to stop performing herself. This is the thing nobody says out loud about what older men do that younger men almost never can. It is not a technique. It is not a behavior you can rehearse in a mirror. It is the byproduct of something much more fundamental. It is the byproduct of having lived long enough to understand that your value does not depend on any particular woman's response to you, on any particular room's reaction to your entrance, on any particular outcome of any particular interaction. When a man truly knows this, not as an idea he has been told, but as a fact he has lived into, his entire quality of presence changes. And women feel that change before they have formed a single conscious thought about it. Let me be specific about what this looks like in practice, because vague language about presence is everywhere and it helps almost no one. I want to give you the actual observable behaviors that are the external expression of this internal state, the things women are registering when they cannot explain why a man is compelling. The first thing is this. A man who has arrived at himself does not feel silence. Most men, when a conversation pauses, when a moment goes quiet, experience that silence as a problem to be solved. They reach for something. Another question, another observation, another thread to pull. And the reaching is visible. It communicates a low-level anxiety about the moment, a need for the interaction to keep moving, a slight desperation to be interesting enough to hold the other person's attention. Women feel this reaching the way you feel someone fidgeting next to you in a dark room. You cannot see it exactly, but you feel the restlessness of it, and it makes you restless too. A man who is genuinely at ease with himself sits in silence the way he sits in a comfortable chair, without urgency, without apology, without reaching for the nearest conversational object to fill the space. And that quality of stillness in a pause, the willingness to let a moment simply be without immediately trying to improve it, communicates something to a woman's nervous system that almost nothing else does. It communicates that this man is not afraid of her. not afraid of the moment, not afraid of the empty space between them. He is comfortable here, he is comfortable everywhere, and his comfort gives her permission to be comfortable too. And that permission, that sudden relief of not having to manage the energy of the interaction, is one of the most quietly powerful experiences a woman can have in conversation with a man. The second observable thing is the way an arrived man listens. And I need to draw a very specific distinction here because there are two kinds of listening that look almost identical from the outside but feel completely different from the inside. The first kind is listening to respond. The man hears the surface of what is being said, begins constructing his answer while the other person is still speaking, and delivers his response the moment there is a breath of space to do so. He is engaged. He seems attentive, but he is fundamentally processing the conversation as a performance in which his contributions are the main event, and her words are the setup for them. Women feel this kind of listening as a particular form of loneliness. She is speaking but not truly being received. The words are going in, but nothing on the other side is actually changed by them. The second kind of listening is what I want to describe because it is what older men who have genuinely done the work of being present are capable of. It is listening to understand, not to respond, not to agree, not to redirect, not to demonstrate how much the content resonates with their own experience, simply to understand what is actually being communicated. And this kind of listening has a physical quality. It is slower. The response does not come immediately. There is a beat, sometimes two, between the end of her sentence and the beginning of his. Not because he is slow or disengaged, but because he is actually finishing receiving what she said before he begins formulating what he thinks about it. And in that beat, in that brief held space between her words and his, something happens to the woman speaking. She realizes she was actually heard, not processed, heard. And that realization, that specific felt sense of having been truly received by another person, creates an opening in her that no compliment and no amount of charm and no degree of physical attractiveness can manufacture. The third observable thing is what I think of as the willingness to be wrong without cost. And this one is subtle, but it is one of the most powerful markers of a man who has genuinely arrived at himself. Younger men, men who are still building their identity through external confirmation, experience being wrong as a small death, not consciously, but somewhere underneath the conscious mind, in the place where identity actually lives. Being corrected or contradicted feels like a threat. And so they defend, they push back past the point of reason. They find ways to reframe the correction so that they were actually right all along, or they overcorrect entirely and become suddenly suspiciously agreeable, which is its own form of dishonesty. Either way, the interaction has a slight charge to it, a slight tension that comes from the fact that somewhere underneath the conversation, a man's sense of self is being asked to absorb a small threat. And women manage this charge constantly in conversations with men who are still in this place. They learn very quickly which subjects to avoid, which corrections to withhold, how to frame disagreement as question rather than statement, so the man can maintain his position without losing face. It is exhausting management work, and it is so normalized that most women do not even notice they are doing it. A man who has arrived at himself does not need any of this management. He has been wrong enough times in his life to understand that being wrong does not diminish him. He has changed his mind enough times to know that a better argument is a gift rather than a threat. He has had enough real conversations that cost him something and gave him something, to know that intellectual honesty is more interesting and more satisfying than being right. And when a woman encounters this in a man, when she offers a different perspective and watches him actually consider it rather than defend against it, something in her relaxes at a cellular level. She becomes honest. She starts saying what she actually thinks rather than what she has calculated he wants to hear. And that honesty, that freedom to think out loud without managing his response, is the specific condition in which real intimacy becomes possible. Not romantic intimacy necessarily, human intimacy, the intimacy of two people who are genuinely present with each other rather than performing adjacent monologues and calling it connection. These three things together, the comfort with silence, the quality of listening, and the freedom from defensive identity, are the observable external expressions of the one thing, the single underlying quality that men over 60 carry when they have done the work. And that quality is this: they have stopped needing to be more than they are. They have stopped reaching for a bigger, better, more impressive version of themselves to present to the world. They are exactly themselves in this moment, in this room with this person without apology and without performance. And that completeness, that rare and quietly extraordinary quality of a man who has simply arrived at himself and is comfortable staying there, is what women feel when they cannot explain why a room shifted when he walked in. And here is what I need you to understand about what I just described. It is not a personality type. It is not something you either have or do not have. It is not reserved for a certain kind of man or a certain kind of life. It is the natural destination of any man who is chosen, consistently and honestly, to know himself rather than perform himself. And the men who have made that choice, who have done that work, carry something that no younger man can replicate no matter how hard he tries, because it cannot be rushed, it cannot be learned in a weekend, it cannot be performed into existence, it can only be lived into. And you have been living into it for 60 years. The woman at that dinner table, the one who was oriented toward that silver-haired man without knowing why, was not responding to his age. She was responding to his completeness, to the specific and rare experience of being near a man who needed nothing from the room and therefore gave everything to it. His attention was free because it was not occupied with managing his own image. His presence was full because it was not divided between being here and monitoring how being here was landing. He was simply, entirely, unhurriedly himself. And that, more than any other single thing, is what makes a woman surrender the part of herself that is always on guard. You are that man, or you are becoming him. And the only thing standing between you and the impact I just described is the belief that what you have accumulated through decades of living is somehow less valuable than what you had before you had any of it. It is not less. It is everything. It is the only thing that was ever actually worth having, and she already knows it, even if she has never found the words to say so.